Yo, what up? It's Brock, and thanks for watching today's video. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. If you're new here, welcome. I'm glad you found me, however that may have been. I hope you enjoy what you see. I hope you enjoy the other videos I have on the channel. If you're into filmmaking, if you're into storytelling, if you're into technology, this is the place to be. So thank you. Hit that button, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. I'm glad that you're here. So today I'm talking about my initial review of the Canon C70. This is a very interesting cinema camera. It sits in a weird place in the market. It has, you know, the FX3 as competition. It has the Red Komodo as competition. And that's pretty much it. You could argue the A7S III and the Canon R5 and R5C are also competition, but I'm talking purely cinema cameras. And truthfully, the only direct competitor in this price bracket is the Red Komodo. The FX3 is kind of a hybrid cinema camera. I don't really count that as a full-fledged cinema camera just because it lacks some of the cinema camera features. It's basically an A7S III in a little different body, but still an amazing camera. But when we're talking pure cinema camera and cinema camera features, it's the C70 and the Red Komodo in this price bracket, and that's it. The reason I chose C70 over the Komodo was initially because of the ergonomics, the built-in ND filters, and the Red was more expensive. By the time you bought all the accessories to actually get the camera up and running, it was about $1,500 to $2,000 more expensive than the C70. And with a very comparable image, the C70 was looking like the perfect choice. So now after having this camera for about a month, I think I made the correct decision. Not that the Red Komodo is a bad camera by any means. Arguably, it's even better on paper when you look at purely specs, but the C70 just fits what I do in my workflow so much better. So now let's break it down into three different categories. We're gonna talk functionality, build quality, we're gonna talk image quality, and ultimately just my final thoughts in using this camera and who I would recommend it to. So now let's kick this off with build quality and ergonomics, starting with the ergonomics, and I think they're amazing. For me, I love big cameras. I love heavy cameras. I get better footage with heavy cameras. This has a super chunky grip on it. So with big hands like I have, it's the perfect camera for me. I also love that you can kit it out super small with the batteries that come with it, or you can go full V-mount rig, throw it on rails, and kit it out really big. So I like having options, and to me, this is the perfect hybrid depending on the shoot you're going on. You can either go small or you can go large, and I think that combo is just really awesome. This is one of the main reasons why I went with it over the Komodo, was because kitted down, the Komodo is just too small for me. I don't like, there's nowhere to hold, there's nowhere to really grab it. It's not that heavy, and I just like the C70 kitted down small. I can use it straight out of the box and still get good footage without having to add a bunch of stuff to it to make it actually functional for me. And this is just my opinion. That's just the way I like it. So this is another reason why I went with the C70. So now when it comes to build quality, this camera is not as good as some other cameras that I've seen from Canon, especially. Like I have some C200s at my job, and the build quality on the C200s is much better than the C70. The flip out screen is kind of flimsy. The buttons and the scroll wheels are not the super nice, high quality tactile ones. They're a little plastic and cheap feeling, but none of it's really a huge deal. I'm not worried about the camera. I don't think it's gonna break. I think the body itself is tough. It's just some things like the buttons and this flip out screen. Now the flip out screen is better, and I think Canon has revised it since the initial release of the C70. I know people online originally say it was really bad. This one's not brutal, but I've definitely feel like the flip out screen on my R6 is more sturdy than this one. So just to keep that in mind, but I don't think it's gonna be an issue when it comes to actually using the camera. But yeah, I was a little disappointed by the build quality, at least when it comes to the buttons and some of the screens. But other than that, I think the build quality is super solid. I love where everything is on this camera. I love all the buttons. I love just everything about it when it comes to functionality and ergonomics. I wish there was one more record button on the back, but other than that, I have no issues, and ergonomics is great. Build quality, pretty good. Good enough by any means. Very good. I've just seen better from Canon, so that's a little disappointing, but other than that, I have no complaints. So now this is the big and arguably the most important topic about this camera is, what does the image look like? Well, as you guys saw from the intro video, I think it looks phenomenal. I'm blown away by the dynamic range on this camera. I'm blown away by the colors. Everything about it is just amazing. With that speed booster especially, you get that extra stop and that full frame depth of field, and honestly this camera is such a good value for the money with the image that you get out of it. Now remember, this is the same sensor that's in the C300 Mark III, and that is a $10,000, almost $11,000 camera. You're getting that in a $5,000 camera, the same sensor. So you get the dual gain output, which means you get amazing dynamic range for the price point. The noise level is very low, even at 800 ISO, which is native for C-Log 2. It looks great. The image is super clean. Sometimes when I'm shooting into like shadows where there aren't any super bright highlights, I'll bump it down to 400 because you don't need all that dynamic range. But man, when you're at 800 ISO and you're outside and you get all the dynamic range you get out of this camera, it's unbelievable. I've tested a lot of the different recording modes on this camera, and I'm not going to get into the weeds because there's plenty of videos out there that go into super technical detail. This is just my experience with the camera. I'm not an overly technical person. I'm not going to go through and measure dynamic range in each codec and do all these type of things. There's plenty of videos out there that do that. But for me, the recording formats that I've recorded in 4K 120, I've recorded in 4K 60, I've recorded in XAVC and the MP4 file formats. I've recorded in the highest quality codecs and the lowest quality codecs, and they all look great. It's pretty impressive how good these lower quality codecs look even out of this camera. So I'm really impressed and I'm loving it so far. There's just something about the image of this camera that I can't really put my finger on as to why it's just such a notch above stuff like an R5 and an R6. It just doesn't have like, oh, you're shooting on a mirrorless camera look. Like, those cameras look amazing, and I still love my R6, and there's a lot of great options out there, but there's just something different about this camera. It's a level up. I think the mirrorless cameras tend to be over sharp to me sometimes, and I love the softer, more cinematic look of the C70. You get the beautiful highlight roll off in the sensor, and I just think that there's something different. I'm sure there's a technical reason for what I'm saying or what I'm seeing, but to my eyes, it's just a notch above when you get something like this. It's a full-fledged cinema camera. You have a full-fledged cinema sensor in this thing, and it does one thing, and it does it really well. It's not trying to be a photo and video camera. It's doing video only, and it truly does it great. And I think there is something to that as opposed to shooting on basically a photo camera that's been adapted to shoot videos as well. There's a difference there, and I think that's what I'm seeing with this thing so far. With the speed booster especially, I've been very impressed. The only downside is you can't use RF glass with it. It's only EF glass. But when you use that, you basically do get a full frame image and you get an extra stop or two of light. So it's a great all around option to have that in your kit, especially if you do have a lot of EF lenses like myself. So right now it's working great for me. Eventually I'll probably will shift everything over to RF, and there's probably going to be an adjustment going from, you know, full frame images basically to Super 35, but I can get used to it. And ultimately, the better image, the better dynamic range, C-Log 2, all of these things are worth the trade-offs to me of not having full frame. And stuff just like built-in ND filters, the mini XLR ports right on board. You got 2 of those, a great audio interface. You're recording to just SD cards. You don't have to worry about CFast or CFast Express or CF Express. You don't have to worry about any of those things. Like, it's just cheap to get into this camera when you compare it to other things on the market. The battery life is great. You can kit it out really large. You got built-in ND filters. You have plenty of assignable buttons. You have all the options that you could need. Full-size HDMI. The only thing it's missing is SDI. If you had SDI, it would be perfect. Ultimately, you just get a great cinema camera at a great price with all of the features that you could want, all the options that you could want, and I am just blown away with it. And I'm so thrilled and so happy that I was able to get one, and that this was the choice that I made, because I feel like I definitely made the right choice for me. So I'm very, very happy with the Canon C70. So ultimately, I would recommend the C70 to pretty much anybody. I mean, unless you're shooting full-fledged, you know, feature films, you don't need a Red Epic or you don't need an RA Alexa, right? You have great cameras at great price points. And I think the Canon C70 will work for a run and gun filmmaker like myself, who's mostly solo, shooting by yourself. You're doing your lighting, you're doing your shooting, you're doing your audio, you're doing it all. But I also think this camera's great if you're a DP on a set and you need a camera that can provide great cinematic images. And I think this camera holds its own against the Ursas of the world, the Red Komodos. It punches way above its weight class in terms of image quality, in my opinion. And I think this camera is perfectly capable of being an on-set, kitted out, full cinema rig to shoot, you know, a short film or a documentary or, you know, corporate videos, all those type of things. It's just a great run and gun camera, and you can even shoot weddings with it. Like, it's so versatile, and I think that's what's so cool about it to me, is like, if I want to have a full kitted out rig, I can do that. Or like this weekend when I was at the lake, I stripped it down and I just used the Ninja on top as my monitor, built-in battery, SD cards, and just called it a day and just shot some stuff without having to put the V-mount on, and it still worked great. So there's so many options, and I'm just really impressed and like this thing, and I would recommend it to pretty much anybody if you're in the market for a level above the mirrorless cameras of the world, like the, you know, R5, R6, A7S. Like, I think this camera is just a notch above those when it comes to image quality and just the overall feature set. It's definitely worth the money. And if you're looking for that upgrade, this is the camera for you. But also don't ignore the Komodo and stuff like the FX3. If that's more in your wheelhouse, then by all means, they're great cameras and they're gonna get you great results. But for me, the Canon C70 is just the most well-rounded, feature-packed camera for the best value in this price point. There's really no question about it to me. So that is my recommendation. I love this thing. Let me know if you guys have anything else you wanna see about it, any more detailed tests. I'm still working on an R6 versus C70 comparison video. I'm really interested in that. So some interesting results so far. So I'm excited about that. Be on the lookout for that. New videos every week here on the channel, at least that's the goal. So if you're new here, please hit that button, hit that like button, turn on notifications if you like what you see and you don't want to miss any future content. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.